Okay, everybody, we are live. Say hi to Tercio and to Noel, or OG Del Rancho, as many of you know him as. Noel, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, what's up, you guys? What's popping?
What's
What's
going on?
Gucci? I hope everybody's good. Hope everybody's having a good time. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Hail yeah. All right, let's get this thing rolling right here. We'll just jump right into it because there's a lot to go over.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Looking back.
So here we go. This was a recent monologue that Tucker just did very recently. And we're going to kind of just go over it and see what there is to kind of pick apart and how it affects us, all of these fun things. So let's jump right into
Hey,
it.
hold on.
What's
I
up,
haven't seen
Tercio?
this. You told me do not see it. So
Yeah.
now I just gotta ask you: is this one of those where he, um, like pretends America is like a shining beacon of something, and like Spain did everything wrong with Hispanics?
I don't actually know. I didn't watch the full thing either.
Oh
I only
shit.
saw like a
Okay.
minute.
So we're
So
going in
this is going to be
blind.
a
Okay.
very authentically uh, sort of reaction to it. So let's go.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Looking back, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 turned out to be one of the most significant pieces of legislation ever passed by the U.S. Congress. Now, the people who wrote it knew that it would be, so naturally they spent a lot of time trying to convince everyone else that, in fact, it was no big deal. This is not a revolutionary bill, assured Lyndon Johnson when he signed it. The first tip that it was, in fact, a revolutionary bill. And then there was this. On the Senate floor, Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, the man who drove the bill, went out of his way to explain that the Democratic Party was absolutely not trying to replace the American population with more compliant foreign-born voters. No way. That's an insane conspiracy theory, he explained. Quote, this bill will not flood our cities with immigrants, Kennedy said. It will not upset the ethnic mix of our society. It will not relax the standards of admission. It will not cause American workers to lose their jobs.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, in terms of like how they were trying to get that. I think it was Emmanuel Seller that actually was the main author for this bill, if I'm recalling correctly. But that is kind of odd to me, Tercio, that like they have like the Immigration Act of I think 1925, which was the one that was currently in place at the time in 1964. And this bill, believe it or not, actually, for the most part, severely limited people from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe into coming into the United States and put quotas on them for the first time after the Civil War. Because these Ellis Islanders were legitimately like pissing off the native population quite a bit. Like, that's not an actual meme. That was something that was genuinely occurring. And on top of that, there were actually much larger numbers of people that were not of European descent that were coming into the country as well. I mean, like for example, even like Marcus Garvey, that Jamaican like Hotep guy that a lot of people have heard of. He was an immigrant from Jamaica, but he was still able to like move to the U.S., live there, conduct business, and that's sort of the thing that like a lot of like white nationalists and the people that are like kind of like racist in general don't point out. But to Richard Spencer's credit, he actually has in the past pointed this out, is that like America, regardless of the laws that were in place, has always been a multiracial country. Like there is no escaping that. But at the same time, the laws were definitely implemented in a certain way to favor people that were WASPs, generally speaking. Anything you want to add to that, Third Seal, before we continue here? If not, then I'll just hit play.
Hold on, I'm
It's all
repositioning
bitterly.
myself. I'm,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm at a ball game with my kids, so it's like whenever I want to talk, I gotta reposition myself. So
yeah.
there's no children screaming. Yeah.
Very good.
So I was gonna say that. I mean, this is gonna sound very basic, bitch, but it's like they could have codified the ethnic makeup in the Constitution. They could have done whatever they wanted, but they left it up to the legislature, knowing that it could change, right? Like knowing that at one point the laws changed so that they could let in anybody else. Just to point that out, just to point that out,
Well, let me point. Let me.
they were
Yeah.
counting on the customs not changing basically, but they didn't protect it. They didn't lock it in.
Exactly. And I want to say as well that like among the actual founding fathers that existed here, um, basically a lot of them weren't completely on board with like what is the preferred sort of immigrant. Like a lot of people, like Thomas Jefferson kind of wanted to stop immigration. Well, depending on what time in his life you read his stuff, sometimes he was more open to almost anyone coming into the country. He's even written about being open to even allowing Muslims to come to the U.S. And other times he would say things like, that they should kind of cut off immigration almost entirely and even mix with the actual Native Americans that existed in the U.S. The thing that you'll notice a lot about a lot of these people is, I mean, their views they fluctuate over time. It's very rare to see someone who just has the same exact views throughout their entire life, even among like people like the founding fathers. I mean, yes, they were liberal as fuck, but at the same time, these things changed a lot. So let's continue on.
Amusing when you look back at it, because of course that is precisely what this bill did. This bill changed America completely and forever, and the numbers show it. In the years since that legislation passed, the United States total population exploded by 140 million people. You're seeing that chart on your screen right now. What direction does it point? Well, steadily upward. That's the population. Now, where did all those people come from? There's nothing wrong with more people. The question is, who are they and where do they come from? Well, what you're seeing is not the kind of organic growth that you would see in a healthy society that's become more prosperous and welcoming of families. It's not like people were so confident in the future they decided to have more kids. No, it's just the opposite, exactly the opposite of that. In fact, since Ted Kennedy's bill became law, birth rates among native-born Americans, which are the clearest possible measure of optimism in the future, those have dropped off a cliff, and you're seeing that chart on the screen now. It's the inverse of the first chart. This chart points downward. In 2020, the most recent year for which we have data, the overall fertility rate in the United States hit the lowest point ever recorded, and that was before COVID. This country is now well under the so-called replacement level. That means if we continue on this trajectory, and no one's trying to take us off this trajectory, eventually there will be no more native-born Americans. So you put these two graphs together, and what do they show you? Well, they show you a number of things, but here's the main one. Sometime around 1965, our leaders stopped trying to make the United States a hospitable place for American citizens, their constituents, to have their own families. That used to be considered the central task of leadership, perpetuating the population. If people are happy and confident, they'll have kids. They're vested in the society, and if they're not, they won't. That was their job. So they stopped doing it, and instead they just imported new people. That's literally what happened. Now, you're not allowed to point this out, of course. The media become absolutely hysterical when you do because it's so obviously true. What's interesting is that if something like this happened in any other country, say in China or Japan or Nigeria, the populations of those countries would likely revolt because you can't do that. The leaders of a country can't change the population of the country, especially in a democracy, without the consent of the existing population. So if those populations in, say, Nigeria, for example, revolted, the New York Times would be deeply sympathetic to their outrage. Again, you can't just replace the electorate because you didn't like the last election outcomes. That would be the definition of undermining democracy, changing the voters. But when it happens in this country, there is mandatory media-enforced silence. And in fact, if you notice it's happening, it's your fault. You're immoral. You're a racist. But it has nothing to do with race. It's about change.
See, and this is like where I think it fundamentally starts to get dishonest. Because if you look at the actual immigration patterns of the people that were, let's be real, the people that created America, that were settlers. And I mean settlers in the genuine sense of, there's a bunch of empty land. There's a bunch of like Indian, or maybe there's a bunch of Indians maybe in a lot of these, nomadic Indians, and some that are even settled in a lot of this land. And you had these people from places like Ireland, from Scotland, from even Germany and Britain, obviously, coming in, building log cabins, fighting Indians, pushing them more and more west. But to be fair, like it was primarily Northwestern Protestants, Northwestern European Protestants in particular. So he's trying to like be dishonest and claim like, no, we just, this has nothing to do with race. But low key he is, because it's like that's what it was, and it was codified into law at the time. Like, am I wrong, Tercio, or what?
No, yeah, and like this is not the first. Like he's handling as if it's the first time the U.S. has had immigration at some point. Like a population demographic alteration levels of immigration, and you go to the Midwest and there's almost no, like everybody's German. Like everybody's descended from somebody in Germany. You go to New York, you have the Italian population, right?
Right.
And New York was WASP central before before the 19th century, right? Like
Yeah,
you think
the mass
yeah.
non-Northwestern European immigration didn't start occurring until like the Civil War was finally over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so it's like you believe those people were able to adapt to the, and I mean I will concede there are nuances, right? Like maybe there's too many people going on, coming in right now, and that threatens to change whatever. But it's like that always happens, right? That's what I mean. It's like, are they, like, what's happening to the United States? What's happening to those immigrants? Are they becoming, are they getting assimilated, or are they forming ghettos in like maybe Muslims, like maybe Africans are doing in parts of France, mostly Muslims, I would believe. It's like it is about race. That's the issue. Like the race is the problem. The immigrants that are coming in right now are not white, and to be fair also to Americans and to Tucker Carlson, like when the Germans were coming in, the Americans did complain. Like it wasn't like they just like, oh yeah, with open arms, like, oh, just because you're white, you're my white brother, I'll accept you, and now because you're not my white brother, I won't accept you. So it's like liberals are almost right, and when they call out like this is a process that has happened before, right? Where you accept a mass of people from another country. There's a struggle, there's a clash between the culture of the people that come in, and the culture of the people that are already there, and something else, something not entirely new, but something different comes out, and I don't know, like maybe you want to make the argument that the current immigrants are not a good mesh. They don't mesh well with the current culture. I don't know. Maybe that's what he wants to say when he says it's not about race, but it's like it's a bit disingenuous, right? Like, to say like it has nothing to do with race.
And the sort of thing is like America, in a lot of ways, was generally a pretty shitty place to live until people started immigrating in much larger numbers after the Civil War, generally speaking. And the thing is that when America started to become more generally relevant on the world stage, it was because they were the sons of many of these immigrants, oftentimes from like Europe, oftentimes Jewish actually, but not always. But like these more like Ellis Islander type immigrants, their children would go on to be insanely successful compared to WASPs. This would create a lot of resentment. But at the same time, these same rich WASPs, they wanted these people in the first place and were able to use their, I guess, how do I put it? Their ambition that the natives didn't have to like actually, make innovations. If you look at people like, for example, some of the most notable American scientists have often been like, the children of immigrants. You look at like, for example, the people that made nuclear weapons, for example. These were very much often immigrants or the children of immigrants. A lot of them were Jews, as we said before.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the thing. Tucker Carlson wants to put in your head that the original, like, Puritan stock people were the ones that made everything of importance in the U.S., when this has not actually been the case in the slightest. You go to places like Harvard, and it's always been filled with the children of like immigrants from many parts of the world for a reason. You know what I mean?
It's like the United States has never been the reason why race, like saying it's not about race, is disingenuous. Is not because he necessarily hates brown people, but the fact that he is framing his argument as if the United States was an ethnic nation, like it was always about ethno-nationalism and ethnicity, when it was pretty clear from very little after, very shortly after the founding of the nation, that they were all about, taking in people from outside, and they being the beacon of liberty, and they're, like a lot of white man's burden type of stuff coming, messianic, America's a shining city on a hill, that kind of stuff, which has a universalist tone running through it, right? You can't talk about,
Yeah.
yeah, what, yeah,
I was gonna say, yeah, keep going,
yeah.
keep going.
No, I was going to say that it has a universalist tone in it, and like you see it even with the Manifest Destiny. There's always this type of, yeah, we're expanding, but we're also taking in some of the people that we're displacing, and like the Statue of Liberty. Give me your, again, like the issue with this, right, is that when you lay out the arguments, you risk sounding like a libtard, because it's a lot of the talking points of liberals, of progressives, and libtards that say stuff like this. But they say it because it's like the only kernel of truth, the only argument that they can actually wield that is correct, that is true, which is that the United States has always been like that. And the proof of it is that the fact that they had to come up with whiteness.
Right.
Precisely because they couldn't just say like, oh, this is an Anglo-Saxon nation exclusively, only ethnic Anglo-Saxons and maybe the Dutch are allowed. No, they had to come up with whiteness precisely because they first tried to bring every every ethnicity of Europe in, right?
With not only that, but you had entire states that were also majority black for a long period of U.S. history as well, and you had to differentiate obviously the white and black populations.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Like if you look at colonial America before it became a state, the Carolinas, for example, and I believe Georgia, had literally pound for pound, body for body, more blacks than whites, straight up. In fact, if you look at current Southern demographics today in the antebellum South, white people are like slightly outnumbering blacks. That's not how it was for most of history. Usually there were actually more blacks. And I think what's kind of interesting, and a lot of people don't think about this, is if you look at the colonial societies, whether it's North America, Central, or South America, a lot of people don't understand that interactions between quote unquote white and black people were way more common back then than they actually are today. Had you been in colonial America centuries ago in the 1600s, you would have seen whites, blacks, mulattoes, etc., interacting with each other and working on shit 24/7. And a lot of people can't internalize the fact that like America was not a white ethno state from the beginning, not even close. They talk, a lot of these people want to claim that Latin America had a caste system, but if anyone had a genuine caste system, I would argue it was the United States,
Of course. But it's all projection. It's all projection with these people. Like, all the crimes that they have committed, they project onto everybody else. That's it. Well, the crimes, all the actions. Let's not even be moralistic about it or legalistic about it. Like all the actions that they commit, but with an emphasis, with a heavy bias on the negative ones, they project outwards, and that is their MO. That is something that's unique. That is something that is unique. I'm sorry for interrupting. Yeah, that is something that is unique to their civilization. Like I can't, and maybe it's because of lack of exposure, right? Like I don't have much exposure with Chinese, with how the Chinese behave or anything of the sort. But that particular projection is something that is very unique to, let's say, gringos of all colors.
Yes, and I want to say this too. So, there's something very interesting I've been noticing on the internet very, very lately. So, for example, if you saw the recent Roe v. Wade overturning that occurred in the United States, you saw all of these white liberals acting insanely racist towards Justice Clarence Thomas, for example. I mean, like I've seen a ton of hilarious like Twitter screenshots where they're calling him the N-word, they're calling him all of these things. And then I saw another thing that happened a few days ago where there was a recent, I think, Gallup poll. It was a very big polling organization that most people take seriously. And they did, it was like a Biden approval poll. Like, what do you think of him as president? And basically, this poll found that the vast majority of Hispanics, eligible Hispanic voters, like 70%, disapproved of Biden. In fact, according to that poll, Hispanics disapproved more of Biden than actual white Americans by like 10%, actually. And when this started making the rounds on Twitter, I saw a bunch of white liberals saying like, fuck, like getting super mad at Hispanic people. And then whenever you had that that Republican congresswoman that got elected as well from Mexico, you saw the same thing again. And I think a lot of white liberals are starting to show their true colors when we don't do everything that we want them to. They were hoping that we'd be like Black Americans and that we would just vote Democrat mindlessly and not even think about it. But all of the evidence, and we touched on this on the last video we did, Tercio, where we were responding to Kraut, our favorite German, that like the Hispanic vote is much more split, and this is probably only going to intensify with time. This idea, and this was a talking point that Tucker Carlson even brought up briefly. He was basically arguing that the Immigration Act of 1965 was a Democrat conspiracy to just have endless Democrat voters forever. And it's like we're not seeing that pan out anymore. Republicans can definitely win general elections. They can win in places that are much more heavily Hispanic than people ever thought. So anything you guys want to, especially you, Noel, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I've always, when I talk to non-Hispanics and, about kind of their political views, I always try to explain to them that Hispanics aren't liberal or conservative; they're traditional. And the more recent immigrant, the more traditional that person's probably going to be. Now, the assumption is that the Republican Party would be the one that's more on the traditional side of things. But we all know how the false right-left dichotomy works in the United States, where,
Right.
The Republicans will kind of throw a bone to kind of like these family values, yet they're the ones who are just as interested in flooding the country with immigrants because they want to depress wages.
Well, yeah,
And
exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because it's like Tucker is acting like this is a Democrat conspiracy, but it's like, what, you think no corporations were lobbying for this fucking bill to
well,
pass?
that's the thing about personalities like Tucker Carlson, that they're going to give you a big, ample serving of truth, but within that truth, they're just going to give enough of a lie to misdirect and twist, right? He's a gatekeeper. Um,
Precisely.
Tucker Carlson is as elite of a wasp as wasp can get, right? Like Tucker Carlson and his tribe of people is who actually created this country, right? It's not Ellis Islanders. It's not, these other groups that came in later and try to get a piece of the pie. Like the country was actually built for English Protestant people. And that's where
So,
Tucker Carlson comes from. So, he plays this role in today's in a Trumpian world. And Trump's very much the same thing, where they're these fake populists, right? Where they try to appeal to like middle class white America, and try to say like, oh, I feel your pain. Your factory's been shipped away. They play this thing like Mexicans are taking your jobs, which I think is debatable. I think maybe if you're the lowest class white, then yeah, you're probably white trash at that point. That might be the case. But it's a fake populism meant to tap into that emotion that these people are indeed getting screwed, right? Like they are getting screwed, and immigration policy is used to screw them. But that's just one half of the equation. The other benefit that this oligarchical elite class benefits from immigration, in addition to depressing wages, right? Because it's going to depress wages if there's more supply of labor. We all understand economics at that level, right? But the
sure.
other end of this is that, and it's something that's completely ignored in the conversation always, and it's the need for American intervention in Latin America. America cannot allow Latin America to go about its own business,
And to keep
because
its
it would
youth
create an
as well.
existential threat down the line. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Like Thomas Jefferson talked about slavery being a wolf that you hold by the ears. Like you hate holding him, but if you let him go, he's gonna bite the shit out of you. And that's kind of the situation that this class is when it comes to Latin America and immigration from there. I mean, Tucker Carlson himself, as a CIA agent, has admitted that he lived and worked in Nicaragua. All right, so here's how we come together now. And
So
what the
Noel,
fuck
what was he doing in Nicaragua? Do you know?
well, he was helping build railroads and ports and steel mills. He was helping stabilize the economy and the productive capacity of the country so that there's no need for immigrants to come here. Right? He was clearly establishing institutions to help these countries develop. Right? No, that's not what he was doing. He was fomenting civil war. He was bringing in weapons. He was taking out drugs. He was, adding to the culture of corruption. He was making sure that Nicaragua doesn't go on a path of development as much as he possibly can. And that's the whole point here, that here you have him on Fox News raking in bank from these middle-class whites who don't know that they're getting fucked and swindled by this same class that appeals to them, right? Like, these people don't give a fuck about you. They're not worried about some Mexican taking their fucking job. Right, like Tucker Carlson will have this pick me, I forget his name, the one
Pedro Gonzalez.
Yeah, exactly. And Pedro Gonzalez will sit here and talk about how this is a white European country, and like he'll talk about the Great Replacement, but it's like Pedro Gonzalez is vying to replace Tucker Carlson, but we all know that's not gonna fucking happen.
Yeah.
We all know that's not gonna fucking happen. Pedro believes that might happen someday. He believes he might be able to suck so much white ass that they'll let him into the fucking club, but he doesn't know that he needs to be trans in order for whites to accept Hispanic males. You need to cut off your penis. At
the very least, symbolically, you need to.
Exactly. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's the main thing to understand here, that there's other aspects to this whole immigration issue that are never talked about. Again, and as an American, if you're white and you're middle class and you listen, you have to understand where this class is thinking from. They're actually doing the smart thing by constantly intervening in Latin America and slowly bringing in the population. Because I don't know if you already showed this graph, but Tucker actually brings up this point. Yet we
haven't gotten there yet. We're gonna get there soon.
The birth rates among foreign-born women.
I don't think he's brought it up yet, to my knowledge.
No.
Okay, yeah.
I got an angle that nobody talks about the immigration. Just very briefly before we continue with the video. Everybody talks about, they're bringing in the Mexicans so that they can lower the wages. But there's another aspect of the immigration part that nobody talks about, which is the remittances, right? Like when remittances are talked about, they are mentioned like, look at all the Mexicans sending money abroad, and
dude,
that's
even
like
spend their money in America. Like
but hold on. Yeah. Well, hold on. Like, yeah, they're siphoning money out of the United States and sending it to Mexico, and Mexico's economy is like 50% remittances from the United States, which is not true, of course, but I'm exaggerating. Anyway, the point is that I'm trying to make is like, how are those remittances being sent? They're being sent via American companies, right? Like Western Union and maybe Remitly, something like that. The big tech. It's big corporations in the United States that get all the that get their fingers on the pie of Mexicans having to send money abroad, because the Mexicans are not using Mexican companies to send the money. They're using MoneyGram and all that. So even then, American, you get the two-pronged attack, right? Like you get the press wages, right? Allegedly, and then you get all these American companies raking in money from the fees from the money that immigrants send back home. So it's like that's an angle that almost never, nobody talks about.
Well, I want to say as well, I mean, I think an important aspect to include with this was, in a lot of ways, in order to compete with the Soviet Union, which had a growing population due to pronatal policies that they put in place under communism, they needed to keep America growing. America and Russia were both growing continuously, and it's kind of like, one can argue, like in terms of like the Mexican-American War, for example, that a big reason why America was able to win was because America was able to get way more people, moving there, settling there, setting up business there, fighting for them, that sort of thing. And that's sort of like why all of Latin America started inviting immigrants once the independence movement started as well, because that was the quickest, the most realistic way to grow these countries' economies. And that's sort of the thing, like these people, they want to have their cake and eat it too. But it's like if we cut off all immigration in the United States tomorrow, like you would have a horrible depression right off the bat, and people would not like people really wouldn't be able to understand just how horrible it would be. It wouldn't be this thing that would work well in the slightest.
I want to let me touch real quick on the whole point of remittances as well, because Tercio brought up a good point. The other thing about remittances is that it's actually not good. Remittances create a culture of dependency, and this is again part of you have to see these policies from a military standpoint, right? It's like, how do you defeat, how do you conquer, how do you dominate without having to send troops and bombs, right? You can conduct warfare through non-kinetic means. And what you have in immigration policy and in economic and political intervention is a form of warfare. The culture of remittances is another form of warfare. Because again, they create this class in these home countries that is basically just dependent on what the sister is going to send back home. And so now these people, like, she thinks she's sending it back home to grandma, but it's the other little nieces and nephews who are tapping into grandma's purse, and they're not working, and they got new shoes from America. Because, $100 is a lot of money to spend over there on a pair of shoes, but $100 for a pair of shoes here is about the going rate, right? So now they're stunting, they're balling, and they're able to do it without ever working. So it's like you end up creating like this kind of quasi welfare system that like it takes away any kind of productive ability that a certain generation of people might be able to have in Latin America. So it's just another tool of imperialism. It's just a very.
I was going to say as well, you see these parallels economically when we're talking about like Eastern European immigrants in Western Europe, where it's intentionally set up so that these people, these Slavs, generally speaking, are dependent on remittances. They send a lot of their youth to go like work in like England, Germany, etc. And you see these places that used to be thriving much more under the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union just becoming very, very dependent on these handouts that you're referring to from their own family members and friends.
Yeah, it's straight up, basically like N-word culturalization, right? Like it's not about a certain race of people, but it's like it's the same system. It's like you're just creating a bunch of people who can live without working. And once you do that, then you're essentially just destroying society in a very, very slow way. And you're assuring that these, again, countries don't develop, so that they're a constant source of cheap labor and that they're not able to render any competition. Like, and then to touch on the other point you had just brought up about population numbers, it's like, yes, the WASP knew that they're not having kids anymore. And they also knew that they weren't going to be able to tap into Italy and Germany and Irish to send their poor and hungry because these countries developed. So what would happen if Latin America develops? Right?
Yeah.
If Latin
America helped these countries develop too, so that less Europeans would come here.
Plus, they needed. I mean, who developed? This is another fact. This is another thing. The myth of Latin America being like poor and just a terrible place to live, insecure. That's from like the 80s until now. Before that, it was pretty much known that this was the best place to live. Like Europeans used to come here because Europeans used to have a lower standard of living, despite all their industrialization, whatever you want to say, because all those things only benefited the top, right? The European peasants were having a much harder time, right, in Europe than in here, which is why you had massive immigration migration to Latin America as well. Like they didn't just all go to the United States. They came to Argentina, Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, everywhere.
They went everywhere.
Mexico. They went everywhere because life here is, and I'll say it, for the last 400 years or 300 years, let's say, 400 years. Fuck it. The greatest place to live is here, bro. Like I'm calling it. I'm saying it right now. Despite all our problems right now, the greatest place to live is down here, right? And so who developed Europe? Who had to develop Europe? The United States, the Marshall Plan, to keep the Soviets at bay. So now the jig is up. Like it's all like the jig is up.
Yeah, what I'm saying is
the
that like the United
the
States
deal is over.
the United States isn't going to do a Marshall Plan for Latin America.
Exactly. So that's what I was gonna. That's what I was getting at, but I got lost in the tangent.
You can argue
Uh,
they maybe did one for Chile, but they're not going to do it for like Mexico, like
Right.
a place right next
Right.
to America. That will
They
Not
never
did
happen.
it
even,
for
dude.
Europe. They did it for Europe.
Chile is still an exporter of raw materials.
They did
Like,
it for Europe because
you
they
know,
had the Soviet Union there. They had to contain the Soviet Union. We here, there's
but
no
also
enemies at the
Europe did
border.
it for itself. Like,
That's true. That's true.
you know,
But
Germany united and Bismarck
because they were allowed,
prioritized labor.
yeah.
And so the Germans had no more reason to leave their country. Like, people
Well,
don't leave their country because they want to. They leave their country because they're in a shitty situation,
right.
and they know that if they cross the pond or hop the border, they might be able to have a little bit more stability, a little bit more order, a little bit more money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um,
But hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish. So my point is that Marshall Plan to Europe, not Latin America, obviously because Latin America is not involved in the war. But the point is that there's no enemies of the United States at the border in Latin America. Like it's all United States. So of course they're never gonna do a development plan because then we become direct competitions. There's nothing. You know. There's no.
exactly.
Yeah. So
I
that's
mean,
my
think
point.
about it. This is where it gets to the nitty gritty, and people really have to zoom out and really see this from a really high level. You have to think like you come from an elite WASP family. You have more money than you care to count, right? Like the political system, the economic system is in a sense built and set up by your own people, right? Okay. And you have to think about playing chess on the hemisphere here. Now, if you look just south of the border, there's twice as many of them as there are us. And even when we say us, I'm already including people who aren't us, right? I'm talking about a shit ton of them with a dash American to it, whether they're Mexican American, Cuban American, Puerto Rican American, whatever the hell. There's all these peripheral whites. There's these Arabs and Middle Easterners, Armenians. All these other people are what make our number up to what it is. And even then, there's still twice as many of them as there is ours. Our median age is in the 50s. Their median age is barely tapping 20. So that means they're gonna, if they don't degenerate, if they don't get into abortions like we're pushing on them, if they don't get into gay marriage like we're pushing on them, then they're going to have another baby boom. And very quickly, this is going to get out of hand. And we're not going to be able to hold the reins on the wolf, right? We're not going to be able to hold the wolf by the ears anymore because he's simply going to outgrow us. So again, if you're white middle class and you're suffering, you have to think from your elite's perspective and realize that, well, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if we had to make a choice out of this shitty situation, then let's keep intervening. Let's keep sending guns into Mexico. Let's keep propping up different cartels. Let's keep the immigrant flow. Let's keep getting caravans to get formed by our NGOs. Keep sending our college kids from NGOs to go form, women's in STEM field immigration caravan. Keep doing this shit. Because if we don't do this, very quickly, this is going to get out of hand. At some point, the Chinese are going to come and build canals and build ports and build railroads, right? At some point, the Russians are going to start putting fucking different spy
Sukhois.
things.
They're giving us Sukhois and helicopters.
Right. And then what are we going to do? That's going to be a much harder problem to deal with than just keep doing what we're doing. We need more people. It's not like white women are having kids. They care more about their dogs than they care about kids.
Yeah.
Right? So what the fuck
Very
are we
well
going to
put.
do? Keep getting Marias and Pedros to come in here? They'll be our perpetual lower class. They're willing to work. They like working. So just let them work. And if the white trash and the black Americans complain because they're getting outcompeted for jobs, well, that's a shitty situation, but it's an easier problem to deal with than Mexico with nuclear bombs, than Brazil with nuclear bombs, than Argentina with nuclear bombs. Because what the fuck are you going to do when these three countries are developed to that point? You're going to tell them what to do? You're going to boss them around? It ain't going to happen. So you got to think smart here. You got to get out of your fucking feelings and really see what's at play here in immigration.
Very well put. Let's continue this on here.
The majority of population growth since 1965 has come from immigration, not from Americans having more kids. In 1965, the number of permanent illegal migrants in this country from Latin America was essentially zero. There were migrant farm workers, but there were no huge populations of people living here illegally. By 2008, that number had grown to perhaps 20 million people. They lied about it, but the best estimates suggest it was tens of millions. And then came Joe Biden. Joe Biden accelerated that sad trend beyond what anyone thought was possible. The foreign-born population is now growing by 132,000 people every month. That's more than triple the average high under previous administrations. It's double Barack Obama's highest totals. According to AEI scholar Mark Perry, we can expect over 9 million new illegal aliens by the end of Joe Biden's first term. Nothing like this has ever happened in this or
pause it
any
real
other.
quick. I think you did pass the part of the graph because he did touches on there. Like, and again, he touches on it, but he doesn't really break it down. He says, like, well, most of our population growth has been because of immigration. So again, if you factor immigration out of American demographics, and then you take that element out of the American economy, you have to think, well, how much power would America have in this moment? Right. So America is turning on the immigration machine and turning that into something that's, net beneficial for the oligarchical class. Yes, it doesn't necessarily benefit the middle class who sends their kids to Iraq, but it does positively benefit Carlson's situation. Now, I think Carlson, deep down inside, realizes how shitty the situation is, and he's worried about it because, unlike most white people or WASP, Carlson actually has a bunch of kids. And so I think he's thinking like, fuck, most of the young people in this country are Hispanic. Like, if we took all the kids of the classrooms and all the country and we put them all together, a gigantic chunk of them would probably be Hispanic. I think the median age of Hispanics in the United States is something like 11 years old in the United States. So most Hispanics are children in the United States. So you got to think about, if I'm a white dude like Tucker Carlson and I got kids, and then there's people like Noel with kids, but Noel's type of kids, they outnumber my kids. You see the competitive dynamics that start to form? Like, right. What's going to happen? Is my daughter going to end up with a fucking pocho? Is my son going to get beat up in school from a pocho kid? Right? Like, these are the real dynamics. These are the real things that are going on. The only people who don't realize this is Hispanics themselves. Hispanics do not realize the actual threat they pose the Americans, the gringos, whether they're white or black. I think they kind of feel it. I think they kind of sense it, but they don't really grasp it.
Because Hispanics are going in good faith. Like, they're just going in because they've been invited. They've been invited, and they go in and do jobs, and they're thinking they're bettering their station in life. And so it's good faith.
But if you listen to people like Tucker Carlson, if you read people like Ann Coulter, which are talking heads, but it's important because they're rabble rousers. They're there to control the crowds, right? They're there to give you guys a nice slice of truth with a little bit of lies, just enough to misdirect you from the actual dynamics and reality of the situation. If you read people like Samuel Huntington, Carol Quigley, these elite educated WASP know the game. They know what Hispanics are, right? Like, to them, they don't care if you have green eyes and blonde. They don't care if you're from Dominican Republic and you're mostly African. You're still a beaner to them. And they understand the existential, cultural, civilizational threat this group of people poses here. They're still, to Hispanics, they think that the Spanish Empire is over, right? They think this entity doesn't exist. It doesn't exist politically anymore. But culturally, civilizationally, it still does exist. The Anglos haven't forgotten that dynamic. They still know what the game is in this continent. It's either Anglo world or Hispano world. The only people who don't know that are Hispanics. They're too busy becoming Indians.
Basically, yeah, very well put.
Country ever. And it's happening for one reason. It's not natural. It's the product of a policy choice. Joe Biden promised amnesty to anyone who makes it across our border. So in 2019, for example, the Trump administration criminally prosecuted 110,000 illegal migrants for violating immigration law. Not that they were bad people, some of them were great people, but you're not allowed to go into someone else's country without permission. That's what a law is. And if you ignore the law, you are no longer a real country. You're something less than that. You're a failed state. So you have to enforce the law, including immigration law. But Joe Biden stopped doing it. Last year, Joe Biden prosecuted fewer than 3,000 total. That's according to DHS data obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. That's a drop of nearly 98%. So naturally, people are coming, because why wouldn't you want to move to the United States, knowing that when you get here, you will be treated like someone who deserves to be here and given every possible public benefit? You'd be crazy not to come. And so they are, in massive numbers. And then traveling, often at public expense, paid for by you without your knowledge, throughout the United States. Watch one border agent explain what exactly is happening.
DPS officers have been assisting Border Patrol under Operation Lone Star for 16 months. In that time, they've apprehended 279,000 undocumented migrants, arrested 17,000 criminals, and seized nearly 320 million lethal doses of fentanyl.
Every state has become a border state because all these individuals that are coming across, aside from the families, the single adults, the gotaways, the drugs that are coming in are going to other states. They're not.
Yeah, what's up?
Just realize that the border guard is a beaner real quick, okay?
That's like always the case.
just take a moment to. I mean, if I'm a white American,
fucking Hispanics coming in, like flipping by my country.
I'm not sure if you've ever seen like episodes of Cops featuring like Border Patrol. Like when I would watch those specific episodes of Cops, like there were usually no white people at all, and like the border police.
The thing here is that, I mean, the middle classes are always naive, but the white middle class is also especially naive because they think that, like, oh, this beer has had a taste of Americanism, and so, like, you know, this only validates that, like, our form of empire is good. But, like, let's be honest here, like, a lot of these gun-ho, zealous beaner border guards are gonna tell you what you want to hear, and they're still gonna fucking take a bribe to let a shit ton of drugs in. Like, you think the Border Patrol isn't more corrupt today than it's ever been? And it's precisely because there's a bunch of beaners in it. Like, don't be stupid. Like, I'm just being, like, honest here. Like, don't be dumb. Don't think that because somebody's flying an American flag that they actually have your vested interests at heart. No, they just got a job, and for that job, they got to spit a certain line of rhetoric. And on the low, they're the ones who are letting these guys in, and they're hundreds of thousands of pills of fentanyl, right? So it's like these are the things that naivete that like really needs to be burst like in people's minds, because like if I was a white middle class person, I would not trust this beaner on TV. Just because he looks like he's talking American doesn't mean he's actually, you know, not taking a little bribe from the cartel on the low, which we know is happening. So, you know,
it never happens ever.
Listen, all I think this confirms that Hispanics do what white people, they do the jobs that white people don't want to do, because you'd think, oh, you know, Tucker Carlson is talking about my country. If you don't have borders, you don't have law, you don't have a country. And then it's like, who's guarding the border? The same people that you're saying are a problem.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah. I think it behooves Americans to really study the end of the Roman Empire, because at the end of the Roman Empire, who were the border guards? The border guards weren't Roman; they were Goths, right? And then who ended up, you know, burning Rome to the ground and conquering it? Well, it was the same race of the people who had become the border guards a generation or two previously. You know, so there's nothing new under the sun. And I'm sure these Goths at the border spoke Latin very well, and they were all about my Rome and my Roman Constitution. they're gonna say what is expedient for the sake of their income to say. This is a whole thing about gusanos too. A lot of people Hispanics make a big deal about gusanos. Cubans are in Miami are gonna say whatever they gotta say in order to get their fucking American paperwork. They're not gonna tell you the actual truth of how they actually feel. They're gonna tell you what they need to tell you in order to get the fucking documents. But when you're sitting at a family party with them at the end of the night and you're at the table, you're having a beer with them, they're going to reveal the actual truth about what they actually think about Fidel Castro. And it's not the trite propaganda that the Americans spit. You're going to see the nuance there, and that's what I'm trying to like drive home here with this Hispanic border guard agent is that no matter how you spin it, these people, and I'm part of these people, I'm just a more honest, blunt one of these people, are going to have dual allegiances. Okay? And at some point, those dual allegiances are going to come into conflict with each other. And the U.S. military understands this, which is why the top rank of the U.S. military very seldom, if ever, have a Hispanic in it. Because the military understands that there are such things as dual loyalties.
They'll have trannies. They'll have trannies before. They have trannies before Hispanics.
Yes, exactly. Because there are dual loyalties, and this is a topic I think that makes people uncomfortable, so they like to brush it under the rug. But like, we gotta be real, dude. Again, like, if history sets any precedent, if we can learn anything from history, look what happened to what was I think it was the Ming Dynasty that got taken over by the Mongols. Well, who was the border guards of the Ming Dynasty before the Mongols took over? Right? Like, there's patterns here, dude. There's patterns here. So, I just want to point that out. And the second point about the fentanyl thing, again, you see here the white way of doing things. White people don't take responsibility for their kids going on drugs. It's the drug dealer's fault. No, it's your fault because you raised Timmy with a bunch of holes in his heart that he had to fucking, take drugs, right? It's your fault that you sent Timmy to Iraq and then he became a fucking opium addict off the Sackler family. And now you guys can't afford OxyContin anymore. So now you guys are buying fentanyl, right?
It's the same as Americans are never immigrants. They're always expats.
Yes.
Like Americans never migrate. They're always an expat, right?
Exactly. It's always, there's always a sleight of hand involved, and it's always around word games. Again, he's pointing at the fentanyl. He's implying that the Mexicans are bringing in the fentanyl, which they are. But who's setting up the Mexican paramilitary organizations that set up the fentanyl? Who's giving them guns? Like, we've all seen Narcos. We all saw the involvement of the CIA. The CIA said, no, the cocaine's about to stop. No. Let's get the Contras to help you guys create a bridge between Colombia and Mexico. And then you guys can keep bringing the cocaine in so I can keep making money so that I can send my kid to Harvard. Right? And I can take a vacation. So again, it's like, you see the predatory nature of this class that has these talking heads be like these populist voices to again ultimately misdirect you. And so the name of the game is, let's get them to fight again. Let's get them to hate the Mexican looking for a better stability, a better opportunity for life, even though we're creating the situation for that. And let's not get them to realize that we're the ones fucking them. We're using the middle class, the rabble of this country, and the rabble of our own country against itself. We're lowering wages. We're fucking winning. We're dominating the continent. And yeah, it comes at the nominal cost of our middle class, but so what? That's the reality here that isn't so obvious. But if you zoom out a little bit, you use your honest mind a little bit, you see how and why it works the way it works now.
Yeah, absolutely. Blue, did you have anything you wanted to add in since you wanted to pop on? I guess you've probably been watching this.
I missed a bunch of what you guys were talking about. I'm just, the last thing I heard was something about green-eyed, blonde-haired beaner, and I figured I'd fit the description, so here I am.
Right. Absolutely. So let's keep going. We're like halfway done with this clip.
The drugs that are coming in are going to other states. They're not staying in Texas. So that's Mexico over there, so they'll come across. They'll bring them across on a raft. And they usually have 30, 40, immigrants on these rafts. They're bringing them across. They know where to drop them off, and they know where to walk.
So here's another thing that's changed since 1965, along with our population. Politicians no longer feel they need to pretend, partly because the population is so different. You've got a lot more people with permanent jobs in American politics. So unlike Lyndon Johnson, Joe Biden didn't pretend that his goal was not to change the population. He said it out loud. During the campaign, Biden referred to illegal immigration as a gift. Watch.
Guess what? They're the reason why. The legal as well as undocumented are the reason why our society is functioning, the reason why our economy is growing. We don't talk about that. We stand up and act like it's a burden.
I mean, I actually did bring this up earlier. Like, he is actually right when he says this shit. This is an economy that can dominate the rest of the world, largely because, again, you're throwing over 100,000 people into this place and incentivizing them to, I guess, try and be productive citizens in the U.S. to the best of their ability. Let's continue on.
It is not a burden. It's a gift.
It's a gift, says a man who has worked in a public job his entire life, who's never had a real job ever, is lecturing you about the economy and how it works, as if he knows. By the way,
like this nigga's ever worked a real job.
I was just about to say that. Like, what adversity has Tucker Carlson faced on the job site? Like,
this nigga's never worked a job in his fucking life. He went from fucking working for the CIA to
but also
a cushy job on Fox News.
And before Fox News, he actually worked for CNN and for, I believe, I think either Cato or the Mises Institute as well, which were just DC think tanks to basically. Again, they have think tanks in Washington, D.C. that are conservative, where they just advocate for more immigration because they actually. Well, to be fair though, these libertarian or conservative think tanks do understand that, like, if you want to compete and dominate the rest of the world, like, you need a lot of immigrants to keep this economy going. If you were to just stop, China and Russia would be able to start growing in like ways that would intensify all the anxieties that these sorts of elites have. And that's sort of the conundrum that Tucker's in. It's like, what the fuck do we do? Because we need we need to keep increasing the amount of people that we have here. Or again, China and Russia are just going to keep getting more powerful. And I don't even think they have a problem. And like, Americans don't even have a problem with taking in people from Europe. Like, Ukrainians are coming into the United States like crazy as well. Dude, now I see Ukrainians all the time here now.
Bro, I'm from Brighton Beach. Like, I grew up.
It's gonna become a problem.
Russian speakers, man. There are like constant flow of like off the boat, especially from Ukraine, Russia too, but especially from Ukraine. Constant flow. There are Eastern Europeans coming into America. Maybe not Western Europeans anymore, but there definitely is still an influx.
Those Europeans, those Eastern Europeans are coming in through the border. Like, go talk to border guards. Go talk to border guards in Miami. Like, I just saw a video where there was a boat that like crashed into like Fort Lauderdale, right? Like, where the houses have boats in their backyards. Like, these guys were trying to flee the Coast Guard, and out comes a bunch of Black West Indians, and then there's and the border agent thought that they were Venezuelans. They turned out that they're Romanian. So
well, you know what? Real quick, I just want to add on top of that too, though, like something that like I noticed about the Russian community, like in my old neighborhood in New York, was that like unlike white people, Russians are still Russian in America, and they work as an ethnic group. So like Russians will like talk to their cousin or like their friend's cousin or something who can get them a worker's permit. And then they'll just, get them the right to come in, get them the worker's visa just to bring them into the country. And there was a lot of people doing that in Brighton, for example, because they work as an ethnic community. And that's very popular. That happens all the time.
Well, and this is why a lot of these, I guess,
Russians
native, like the people who Tucker is trying to appeal to generally, they have this general frustration because right now, and it's always been like this. The name of the game, if you want power in America, is to organize ethnically and to like get shit done. And like white Americans, the foundational ones who don't have money, just don't do this anymore. Generally speaking, they
Well,
don't work
they're
together the way
not
that they used to and have the ethnic cohesion that they used to have because
because
because a
they're
lot
all
of them are
mixed.
Amerimuts, you know.
Yeah, they're Merrimuts, and like there's nothing for them to unify behind, and they're so different culturally.
Besides like liberalism, but that's it.
Yeah, it's like I guess it's like
Yeah.
we look different than them, but that's not enough to like bring
Well,
people
liberalism
together.
by
I
default alienates people and doesn't allow them to do that. That's sort of the problem.
Yeah, what it does, what it does is that it sanitizes ethnicity because it brings the individual to the front.
It turns
And an
Europeans into
individual,
white.
an individual doesn't have an ethnicity because that's not what's important. You're not part of a community. You're an individual. Like you are your own ethnicity, right? Um, and so that's what happens. And when you become an individual, you lose that. And yeah, we're gonna say like that person has like a white culture, but they've lost in a sense any type of ethnicity, any ethnic identity, any ethnic cohesion. And it's just reduced to this kind of superficiality where like now you clump Ellis Islanders and like actual foundational white people into the same group, but their political interests, their culture, their traditions are in fact opposing to each other. And a lot of Ellis Islander children don't really understand this. They don't understand like that they're actually kind of a parasite on actual foundational white Americans. But that's a topic for another discussion.
I mean, yeah, and that's sort of like why. So, like, there was in the 1800s, there was this emergence of this super anti-immigration party called the Know Nothing Party. And what was it primarily? It was foundational Americans getting super fucking mad that these other immigrants from different parts of Europe were starting to displace them and outcompete them, especially their children who were just generally more ambitious. I don't know what it is that intrinsically makes the immigrants and the children of immigrants more ambitious, but it's a real thing. And anyone who has eyes and who's intellectually honest is going to notice that it's a thing. Like a guy who doesn't have a lot of money, whose parents have been in the US since the 1700s, he's going to be more likely to just be okay with not you're just being a loser his whole life, with not trying to make it big, without trying to like go to the city
he doesn't
and
need
make
to.
something out of himself.
Because he can just inherit the plot of land at the trailer
Well, I'm
park,
talking about,
and so he can live without paying rent. He can just live without paying rent. So there's no motivation. There's no need for aspiration. And that's kind of what we're talking about, the culture of remittances. That's kind of what it creates. But you're right, that the immigrants always come here. They're fucking hungry. Like, I said it the other day, like America's not a country. It's a big workplace, right? Like people come here to hustle. They come here to hustle. And I understand that the foundational blacks and whites, they don't have that perspective, but everyone else does. Like
Jefferson actually did, though.
How many tech companies are ran by Indian people? Like they have the most CEOs running American tech firms than any other group. What about nursing? It's dominated by Filipinos.
And Dunkin' Donuts.
Huh?
And by the way, they can't blame affirmative action for this, because affirmative action, if you think it is as impactful as you think it is in terms of like what racists will say, it doesn't help Asian people, like at all.
Yeah, no, it's just that people come here to hustle. They come here to win. This is a marketplace. This is not a country, and it was set up that way. Or at least it became that. And one of Tucker's.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One of Tucker's gripes is that it's like, okay, we're gonna swallow all these Mexicans, and it's gonna change the fabric of this country. Of course it is. Because, like, for example, when they swallowed all the Irish Catholics and the German Catholics and the Italian Catholics, you think that didn't change America? You think that didn't change the fabric of America, the culture of America, the slang of America, the way America walks and carries itself? Of course it did. And so now that you got this other ingredient being blended into the mixing pot, and it's going to change the substance and character of what was there before. And I think that really bugs the Ann Coulters and the Tucker Carlsons. It really bugs them because they know that like there's two teams on this continent, and it's the Hispanos and the Gringos. And so they're like, fuck, dude, we got to become a little bit Hispano in order to maintain our dominance. And that annoys them. That would be annoying to me. Like, okay, I got to be a little bit of a fucking taco eater in order to maintain my dominance here. I got to change my essence a little bit in order to maintain my dominance here. And I gotta adopt the essence of my competitor, my principal competitor here.
I gotta
Yeah.
celebrate Cinco de Mayo now. Oh fuck!
Yo, you
All
should see
right.
how
Yeah.
No,
angry.
And look
I
at
got something. I got something. Hold on. I was gonna say, as you were saying, that immigrants as hustlers. This goes hand in hand with the nature of industrial capitalism that always needs more growth, and
Right.
imperialism and colonialism. Because the traditional way of living is that you establish, maybe not even your grandfather established a state, and then the family inherits it, and they can live off of there. There's no need to quote unquote make it on your own, right? Like you can just live your normal life in the family home, right? In the family stead. Um, with industrial capitalism, you always need this constant need for growth and for people to acquire more goods and consume more services, and that's why you need immigration. That's why you see that it's with liberal industrial capitalism that you start seeing this trend with immigration, right? Like before, people, you used to have migrants, you used to have people displaced by war and that kind of stuff. You used to have invaders, but you didn't have immigration.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean, to be fair to people like Karl Marx who believe that capitalism was the most efficient form of economy to, I guess, raise up your nation, before implementing changes that are for the working class, he's right. It's like if you want to maximize how much you're going to grow an entire country, for starters, you got to start taking a bunch of resources from Latin America. Then you got to start inviting them in order to start working for pennies. And that's how you maximize economic growth in the country, generally speaking. It's exploit the resources and the people of people all over the world, especially the third world. And when Europe was more third world, they had no problem doing this. As Europe started to modernize, they less people from Europe want to go to the US now. And now they have to get people from other places. But if
Well, before
Europeans were
this,
still poor, they'd still be coming in. And again, in the poor parts of Europe, as we talked about,
but
they still are.
real quick, I want to say before this whole like Ukraine situation, you know, uh, life in Europe was a lot better than the U.S. Like the living standards in the U.S. are actually pretty crappy when you compare them to other quote first world countries. I don't think the U.S. is first world. I think it's second world at best. Maybe it's first
Well,
world
it just
for
depends on what class you're in, right? Like
Precisely.
if
With
you're
sure, yeah,
if
Europeans,
you're
it's generally
not able to
there's less of a
access,
huge gap, you know?
way less of a gap. Way less of a gap. You don't have
yeah.
Detroit in most of Western Europe, except maybe London. You know,
No,
or England.
London is not Detroit. It's just
Well,
not. It's a
London has
much
a
nicer
worse
London
place.
homicide
is
rate than New
nice.
York City.
No,
Like
dude.
London has
No,
a
Noel's actually lived in London, dude. It's actually Pete the
I,
meme, and I've
Shit,
been
I
to.
didn't.
I've yeah. Like this idea, like even at British airports, like it is filled with like mostly European descended people. Like to the extent that they exaggerate foreigners living in London, like aren't a giant percentage of them also from Europe, Noel, from what you saw when you were living there?
Poland, I think, right? A lot of Poles.
Yeah, the Poles are the Mexicans in England.
Exactly. So we're only halfway done with this
Slavs
video.
are the
Let's
Mexicans of all of Europe. Like that's why I like Slavs.
Well,
yeah.
you know
So
what's funny? I wanted to bring this point up when you guys talked about Ukrainians coming in, and that's like it hasn't really been an issue. Like, talk to white women, and I mean like real white women. Talk like I don't mean Ellis Islanders. Like I have this friend who's kind of WASP stock, and I remember his mom because like his mom or her husband left the family for an Asian woman, right? So like, don't ask this woman what she thinks about Asian women. What I'm trying to say is that wait till white dudes start taking Ukrainian wives because they're much better women than your average white American woman, and then you're gonna start seeing the issue. Like this is the
That
same
would be
thing that happened with
interesting. Yeah.
slavery. It was when all the slaves, every generation came out lighter skinned than the previous one, that the white women of the South suddenly wanted to ban slavery because their husbands were fucking their female slaves.
and not only that, but I want to
Right.
talk
So just
about
wait
and hold
till
on. So
the
Noel, real
white
quick.
women catch a wind of what's going on and that they're not getting wifed up. And yet, I mean, like look at Trump. His wife is a Slavic Eastern European woman. right? So it's like if you can see,
Everyone wants Slavic women over white women though, because they're more
uh,
traditional. They're
well,
better, better
when
looking. They take care of themselves.
when white women who want to get wife start seeing that dynamic, that's when it's going to become a problem.
I was
So
gonna
it's just
say,
a matter of time.
if you study New York in the 1800s, like New York City for particularly, you saw a huge, often woman-led movement in which women were getting really pissed off that a lot of the like men in society were starting to get with like European prostitutes, and that's when they started making this huge anti-prostitution campaign. um,
Exactly.
because like women aren't dumb as much as some people like to pretend. Like they do
Exactly.
intrinsically understand this shit and understand that like these people are a problem for them. But yeah,
When
let's
the
get
Ukrainian women
yeah,
start taking the top bachelors, that's when it's going to become a problem. It's only a matter
And
of time.
they do, bro. They absolutely
of
do.
course they
Listen,
do.
you
Of
go to
course they do. They're
Biden.
better looking. They're more
Yeah,
traditional. Like they know how to be women. Like they know how to take
They're
care of a
thin,
man and family. Like, of course they do.
yep.
precisely. So we're only halfway done. We're gonna have to watch. We're gonna have to keep watching more of this here.
Biden was so senile that his wife and his handlers gave him drugs before that interview that you just saw. So that's the guy telling you about the economic benefits of illegal immigration.
I mean, dude, Reagan did like half of his presidency senile. It's just kind of like this is a figurehead position.
Now, mostly you're not supposed to notice that that conversation even took place, just like you're not supposed to notice when the New York Times prints an op-ed called "We Can Replace Them," because that's a dangerous conspiracy theory. What are you, Alex Jones? No, we just watch carefully. Not even that carefully. They say it constantly. The Great Replacement? Yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's their electoral strategy. And we know that because they say it all the time. Here's some examples.
Blue wave is African American. It's white, it's Latino, it's Asian Pacific Islander. It is made up of those who've been told that they are not worthy of being here. It is comprised of those who are documented and undocumented.
In a couple of presidential cycles, you'll be on election night. You'll be announcing that we're calling the 38 electoral votes of Texas for the Democratic nominee for president. It's changing. It's going to become a purple state and then a blue state because of the demographics.
The demographics of America are not on the side of the Republican Party. The new voters in this country are moving away from them, and instead they're moving to be independents or to even vote on the other side.
An
Real
unrelenting.
quick,
Yeah,
that's
go.
not. Has he been to like Florida? Like all the Hispanics in Florida vote Republican. They love Trump. They'll do.
Yeah,
like,
dude, Hispanics are totally turning like Texas blue, even though like they're the majority there.
Yeah, they're like not, dude. Texas
Yeah, it's a
Hispanics
lie.
are extremely conservative in their social views. They don't like.
The
They don't like.
Hispanics are probably more conservative than the whites in
They
Texas.
Yeah, this is
absolutely
bullshit.
are. Whites are a bunch of fucking fags. Who are we kidding?
All right,
Like,
hold on, Blue. Just so you know, try not to use slurs on here because
oh,
it's
sorry.
not
It's
allowed on
just-
YouTube. But let's
My
continue.
bad, my bad. But it's just irritating when they do shit like that because it's just not true.
Yeah. It's again, if Hispanics vote Democrat, it's simply because the person who they voted for has a Spanish name. Like they don't have this political ideology. They're just voting for someone with a Hispanic name because they're like, okay, well, he probably has more of my interests at heart than anybody than the Johnson or whoever else is on the ballot.
Right.
So it's
Also,
really not about ideology. It's more about them just voting with their ethnicity. It just so happens that that political machine has absorbed some Hispanics. But like you said, in Florida and Texas is a different situation. I think overall Hispanics would prefer Trump than Biden. And I think you saw that in the election.
I mean, Biden is like the most unpopular president with like Hispanics like ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Hispanics like strong
literally
men
prefer
who
Trump,
are
the guy who
rude
called you
and
guys
boisterous
rapists,
and
over
like
Biden.
alpha. Like they're the culture rather have a Trump, even if they talk shit in the process, but they're gonna respect somebody like a Trump more than a Biden. So that's just it. So yeah, all these guys are saying lies.
Not only that, but let me just say this. Let me say
perpetuates
this real quickly, Noel. Like they not only prefer Trump over that, but when Trump was running for election in the Republican primaries, who were the last two people that were primarily competing with him? It was Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz.
Hmm.
Like they fucking preferred Trump over those two, even over the pygmies. Like the pygmy even prefers the alpha white guy over the other Hispanic pygmies, which I find to be very
Yeah,
interesting.
well, because because Trump is more alpha than the other two. Because the other two are groveling, weak men.
Listen, I gotta go cook dinner. I'll catch up with you guys later. Thanks
God
for
bless
having
you,
me.
bro.
Absolutely. Great for having you on, always.
Cheers,
So let's
man.
keep going.
Stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America from then and on will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
So how is that a source of our strength? He never explained. So clearly it's a source of the Democratic Party's strength, they believe, though actually that plan might not work out for them since a lot of the people arriving may not be sympathetic to Joe Biden, who possibly could be. But electoral politics are really...
So I just want to comment here. See, what Tucker just said there, I think is very sneaky. It's almost like he's, in a very sneaky way, almost saying like, I'm starting to realize a lot of you guys are definitely honorary white. You know what I mean? Like you kind of putting these thoughts in their head almost, because there's going to be some pick-me's watching the show, and they're like, yeah, we're not like that. We like Trump. We don't like Biden, and he's very good. Whoever's writing Tucker's monologues, I think, definitely deserves a pay raise. Maybe he does it himself, but I doubt it.
secondary to the real concern, which is the stability of the country. So the problem with what the Democratic Party is doing right now is not simply that it helps the Democratic Party, though we think that's bad. The problem is that they're doing it way too fast. This is too much change at once for any society, ever, at any point in history. No society can metabolize this many new people and stay stable.
Wait.
Especially not now in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, too much carne asada. I can't digest this.
Yeah.
But you see, here's the sleight of hand where he's making this about party politics. Like, bro, there's no difference between Democrat and Republicans. You see what I'm saying? And so he's holding the audience captive into this false dichotomy of Republican and Democrat.
And even
Right?
worse, Tucker will often even claim that the Republican Party is a bunch of cucks and that they don't actually mean anything. But like right before election night, he always basically goes full Republican Party mode.
Yeah, because that's the name of the game. We got to keep you trapped between Democrat and Republican. That's how we run things, right? It's like this is how American quote unquote communism works, right? I'm using communism from like the middle class white perspective, right, where everything's communism. But this is how it works. It's a false choice communism. It's a consumer communism where you can be Pepsi or Coca-Cola. It's made in the same factory. We just put a different label on it, but that's your choice. Whereas in the Soviet Union, you only get one soda. You get Soviet state soda, right? Here you have the illusion of choice, and that's what keeps the machine running. That's what keeps the oligarchs in power, and that's what keeps the ever more and more fucked middle class more and more fucked. Because the system will, for one set of 4 years, set you to the Democrats, then they'll send you to the Republicans, then they send you back to the Democrats, and at the end of the day, it's just perpetuating the same system. There's no actual difference.
Well said.
Specific moment. Because two unprecedented waves of human migration, you have to add, let's see, a collapsing economy, inflation, food shortages, skyrocketing housing prices, falling wages, the trauma of 2.5 years of COVID, the manufactured racial strife you saw Joe Biden himself encouraging. You put all that together and you have the most volatile possible mix of social factors. So into that, you throw millions of brand new people who have no connection to America whatsoever, people who broke our laws to get here, who don't speak our language, who have no idea what the U.S. Constitution says and don't care. And what do you have when you put all of that together? You have a recipe for social collapse.
And I want to say, this is Tucker he's not talking to actual middle class or working class people when he's saying this. This is him making a direct appeal to his cohorts, the elites that are in charge. This is him saying, guys, we need to reform these liberal policies or we're fucked. This country is a ticking time bomb and we need to fix this now. But the difference is when Tucker actually makes these appeals, there's actually important people that listen and think about it. When some working class white guy or some wignat makes these appeals, nobody gives a shit because he's irrelevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure they're in a difficult situation, but I'm not sure. I think this is all more a dog and pony show.
But I mean, I do think Tucker genuinely thinks like reforms need to be made in order for America to keep dominating the rest of the world.
I don't
Like,
know.
I do think
I don't know if I believe in Tucker that much. Maybe, I mean, maybe you do.
it's
I don't
not
know.
out of a good place in his heart. It's just like he's like, guys, we need to just get a little smarter.
Because, like, think about it. Like, okay, think about all the civil strife that we've had since 2020, right? Again,
Sure.
like, what actually panned out, right? Like, out here where I live, like, I remember there was like a BLM protest gathering around, and it was all white kids, right? The Hispanic kids weren't joining the BLM riots, right? Who was burning down the cities? Like, the UNS report has, like, you know, done pretty good articles on this stuff where it's like none of the Hispanic cities are in flames. LA's not in flames. I mean, there was some protests, but it wasn't like the white cities like Portland and Seattle and, you know, Minnesota, these places where there aren't no Hispanics. What I'm trying to say is that Hispanics played a preserving order role, right? They preserved the order in their localities as opposed to the foundational white and blacks who were burning the cities up and looting. So, you know, he's saying about it, look, there's chaos there's chaos, you know, winter is coming, right? Taco winter is coming, carne asada winter is coming. But what do actual, you know, foundational Americans witness when they actually deal with Hispanics? When they actually get to work with them, right? They realize that they're more of a preserving force than we are. I mean, just when he started the segment, it was a Hispanic Border Patrol agent.
Right.
So, you know, what I'm trying to point out here is that there's an inconsistency. There's an incongruency here. He's trying to sound the alarm, but what's the actual lived reality of most people? Well, we saw that the Hispanics weren't allowing looting in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, it happened right by where I live in Little Village in Chicago. Latin Kings were shooting white and black people trying to loot these Mexican neighborhoods right by
We
Chicago.
saw the Chainsaw Man. We saw it in Miami. We saw it in LA. We saw it everywhere. Everywhere we saw Hispanics in New Mexico, right? The dude, the New Mexican Hispanic dude, a foundational New Mexican Hispanic dude, because Hispanic foundational people exist in the United States. Let's not forget that. That's something that is always forgotten. But this dude shot a white dude who was trying to tear down a conquistador statue. After attacking him with a skateboard, he tried to attack the dude with a skateboard, and he shot him. So you always saw Hispanics like getting put into cuffs in order to try to preserve some order and peace, and you didn't see that from the whites and the blacks.
No, not at all.
So again, it's just incongruency here. He's trying to make people scared, but what's the actual lived reality? And nobody's going to forget 2020.
No.
This is why no sane government would ever do this. The Chinese government would never consider doing this. Even corrupt, dumb governments that can't even keep a national airline.
What the Chinese government did? Hold on. What the Chinese government did was, instead of importing a new population, what they did was lift their own population out of poverty. What a crazy idea!
I mean, it helps having like 1 billion people off the bat as well. You don't.
Yeah, but
really
you know, I mean, Singapore did it with less people. Like it's not the number of people; it's the policies. It's where's the political interest of the ruling class.
Listen,
the political
the
interest
angle
of the ruling class in China and Singapore was in uplifting their people. The political interest of the ruling class in the United States is to be parasites on their people.
Anglo elites have always replaced their own population ever since Elizabeth times. You can see how they did it, where it was their own population, right? Like, it wasn't like they brought new people in, but they changed the Catholic population to Protestant because it wasn't convenient that the majority of the population would be Catholic.
Well, they took the church lands. They took the commons, right? This is when the enclosure of the commons happened. Google that. Find out about that aspect of history. They basically, the peasants had common land that they shared, that they farmed together. Like nobody owned it. It was all of our land. You can graze your sheep on it. I can graze my sheep on it. You can grow wheat on it. I can grow wheat on it. It's our land. The Anglo aristocracy enclosed that land, took that land, and then all these peasants who can no longer farm, they shove them into factories.
Yep, and poorhouses, which were horrendous. Absolutely, but all in the name of economic growth. That's sort of the thing.
Without regard to the Germans, in a sense, did the same thing. They shoved their people into factories, but they did it differently. Why? Because of a Catholic culture. This is what E. Michael Jones always points out to, where the labor was protected, right? Like you wanted labor to be happy and productive. You didn't want to fuck them as much as you didn't want to grind them down to the bone. And what did that produce? Well, it created German industrialization, which is a much higher quality than the Anglo kind.
Yeah, and you're also going, if you placate your workers, they're going to be less likely to revert to things like communism if they're doing generally well.
Yeah, if their interests are being taken care of. like
whether you like communism or not, like it became popular among genuine working class people for like a reason.
Right.
Okay, so let's
do something like this to their own countries because they don't want their own countries to collapse. And it's not an attack on the people coming here, by the way, some of whom are legitimately great people and want to be here for the right reasons. The problem is the volume. No country can withstand what we're going through right now. And in our specific case, it turns out that a lot of the people coming are not ready to participate in a democracy. A huge percentage of the migrants crossing the border today are functionally illiterate. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, 41% of immigrants score at or below the lowest level of English literacy, a level variously described as below basic or functionally illiterate. Now, add to this the problems that American-born people are having with English after 2 years of COVID and suspended education and a life spent staring into a screen. What does that look like? A lot of people who are moving here are not becoming assimilated. And we know that because many haven't learned English after living here for years. The same study found that 67% of Hispanic immigrants do not develop English proficiency even after 15 years of living in the United States. That means around 5 million migrants became citizens without even being able to speak our language.
This is a huge white pill for me.
Not an attack on them, an attack on the people running the country. This could capsize the United States. This is a huge, sprawling country with a massive population. So the question from day one has always been, what holds everyone together? What is the one thing we all have in common? It's not an ethnic group. It's not a shared history. Now it's not a language. So what is it? Well, in the absence of glue, things break apart. That's a physics principle. So no one who cared about the future of this country would do this to the country. It is truly insanity. And yet the Biden administration is trying to make it worse, working hard to make it worse. Fox News is reporting tonight that the administration awarded a $172 million grant to a George Soros-linked organization which exists to, quote, help young border crossers avoid deportation. Now, why is some foreign-born billionaire allowed to change our country fundamentally? That's the big question. Here are the specifics. This organization is called the Vera Institute for Justice, and it stands to gain $1 billion in federal money by the end of the contract, just to subvert our laws. Now, the catch is that no one verifies whether the people crossing the border are actually minors. Right? You can't know who they are. By definition, they're here illegally. And after 9/11, didn't we care about the authenticity of documents? Didn't we have a Real ID Act? But we don't know how old they are. And that's how 24-year-old Medina Ulloa was able to enter this country and murder a father of four in the backyard of his house in Florida in October. He posed as a child so that Joe Biden would fly him at your expense to Jacksonville in the middle of the night. So courtesy of the Biden administration, unaccompanied minors like Medina Ulloa are also arriving in New York, in Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Arizona, and many other places. According, for example, to 12 News in Phoenix, representatives from Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport reported that hundreds of migrants showed up recently with no booked tickets. Roughly 300 to 400 refugees have arrived every single day by bus in recent months. So why are all of these illegal aliens arriving in Phoenix? Well, many of them were dropped off by a nonprofit called RCBH, which brags it's helped nearly 20,000 illegal aliens released by immigration authorities without charges, moving all over the country. And that's where it's happening, all over the country. In Brownsville, Texas, Fox News observed buses contracted by the Biden administration dropping off dozens of male migrants at a parking garage. Our reporters witnessed those migrants go into an unmarked office, then get picked up by taxi cabs and driven to the airport. None of them were children. Commercial airline pilots right now are being told to fly these people all over the country. We spoke to a pilot who's doing it every day, and we're quoting, "We are breaking the law transporting illegals, many of whom are unaccompanied minors."
Seems like a legit source, but all right.
Well, I mean, how else is the political class of this country going to get children to ceremonially rape and sacrifice to Moloch when they do their pedophile parties?
Yeah. I just thought it was funny how the quote just says pilot. Like, could have been just anyone.
Why is this continuing? Because neither party is interested in stopping it. On this question, as on foreign policy, there's only one party, the Uniparty, and it's aligned against your most basic interests, no matter what color you are, by the way. Instead, both parties are finding new ways to give American jobs to foreign-born applicants. 62 Republicans just joined, to their eternal shame, with almost every single Democrat in the House to pass the National Defense Bill. Now, tucked away in that $840 billion piece of legislation is a plan to give away even more American jobs to foreign workers, as if we need this now. So now the children of H-1B visa workers will receive citizenship because their parents took jobs in this country? Huh? How does that work exactly? Shut up, racist. Again, it's not about race. It's about economics and social cohesion, both of which they're destroying. Now, according to our Congress, fewer jobs for Americans somehow makes this country safer. That's been their plan since 1965, and since 1965, both parties have supported it.
Subscribe to the...
So yeah, that's it.
Well, I mean, it's so funny how it's just funny how these fucking segments work, right? So he's talking about these immigrants come here, they don't know shit about democracy, they don't have democratic values, and yet then at the end he closes it off showing how democracy is a sham, and how in this 820-page bill about homeland defense is this thing about H-1B visas and their kids. Well, do you realize why democracy is bullshit and Hispanics don't want to be bullshitted by it? Like, you're gonna lie to me. You're gonna impose your will. Why are you giving me the illusion of democracy? Like, why are you jacking me off rather than give me the real thing? If you're not gonna give me the real thing, don't jack me off. See what I'm saying? Like, Americans love to be jacked off. They love to be jacked off and have their ears tickled.
Yeah, they do.
I dropped off. What happened?
So we finished the video, but that was basically. I mean, you didn't really miss anything. We just so now I want to kind of let you guys do some closing. We'll do some closing thoughts here, and then I'll end the video probably in like 5-10 minutes. Anything else that sort of stood out to you, Noel, that you think was worth mentioning about this?
You know, again, for me, it's just part of the dog and pony show, meant to give you a nice dollop of truth, but enough lies to completely misdirect you, completely lead you to misread the situation, not understand the real dynamics at play on a larger scale. And at the end of the day, it's just meant to keep you emotional, because if you're in an emotional state, you're more easily controlled. And you know that's what Tucker Carlson is there to do. He's there to tap into the populism, especially in a post-Trump America where that really came to the forefront. And at the end of the day, just completely co-opt it and misdirect it. And he himself has admitted there's no difference between Republican and Democrat yet. 80% of the video, he's making it seem like, oh, these beaners are going to all vote Democrat. But I thought there's no difference. So again, the solution he offers you isn't a solution, but just a further perpetuation of the same thing, which is you're going to get fucked, right? And he's right. It doesn't matter what your race is. If you're middle class in America, whether you're white, black, or brown, or yellow, or whatever the hell you are, you're going to continue getting fucked. And like how Tercio pointed out, this is basically just industrial capital, or not even industrial capital. Now we're at financial capitalism doing its thing, where it needs to continue to gorge on people in order to keep economic statistics going a certain direction. But at the end of the day, this doesn't mean anything for the actual middle class people. They're increasingly getting fucked.
Yeah, you also have to remember that these elites, since the British Empire, they are completely Malthusian in their views. Like they see the mass of people, Malthusian and Darwinist. They see the mass of people as a burden, or just as a tool to be exploited, and they don't hold any kind of connection or loyalty to the population. So it's all replaceable cogs to them. So it's like
they're goys.
Yeah.
The population is goyim. It's cattle to them, and they are the lost tribe of Israel, and everyone who's not part of their class is a subspecies.
Precisely.
Yep.
I mean, America was founded by British people LARPing like this, so this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and at one point Tucker asks about like why does a foreign-born investor get a say in critical American stuff, referring to Soros. It's like, but that's
Didn't you just do that in Nicaragua?
no, but also he's the example. Like Soros is the example of like the American meritocratic hook, immigrational hook of like you can come here and you can become someone. Well, Soros did. He is very much a someone. He's very much a somebody. He made a lot of money, and that if you have a lot of money, that makes you a somebody in under this political and civilizational paradigm that you created. So it's like Soros has every right to meddle, to use all his resources to meddle in doing whatever he wants, despite being a foreigner. So what he's saying is like, if Soros wasn't a foreigner, it would be okay. I don't think he would be okay with an American, truly like a native-born Soros. It's there's no difference. Like the Soros is an American. Like, there's no difference. Like,
Yes,
he's not Hungarian. Like,
Soros played
he's
the
not
game.
Hungarian. He's not doing like he's not pushing the Hungarian agenda, like pushing the Hungarian government, like the Hungarian nation, to the forefront at the expense of the United States. Like, he's pushing American values throughout the world. Like, he's a full gringo. He's the poster child of a successful immigrant, or of a successful immigrant American.
He's imposing democratic values and human rights all over the world at the benefit of the American empire, right? Open societies comes to your countries. Soros's NGOs come to your countries. And if you're not fucking allowing gays to get married or women to abort, if you're not promoting girls in STEM, then you best believe there's a color revolution coming for your ass pretty soon.
And again, Soros is not pushing a Hungarian agenda. Like, he's not pushing
he's promoting the JAM agenda. And
exactly.
That's what America is, the JAM empire.
Yeah, have you ever seen that British show? I don't remember the name, but like it's a sketch show, and the two guys that do the sketches, they're basically dressed as Nazi soldiers, and they're having the realizations like, are we the baddies? Like they're having that conversation like, are we the bad guys? And it's like, I think that's a conversation that most American patriots should start having right now. It's like they should start wondering like, are we the bad guys? Like, is the United States the bad guys? And it's like the myth of being the good guys that they acquired since World War II. It's running out. It's time to reassess. Like, is the United States the bad guys?
Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow. I think the closest political voice that kind of touched on that was people like Ron Paul, right? Like the kind of libertarian strain of American politics, where it's like, we don't want to like involve ourselves in the world. Just like, let's just keep our own little thing, our own little fiefdom. Let the world do whatever it wants. That's the closest thing that comes to that. And there was a lot of similarity between that camp, like the Tea Party, right, and what was it? Occupy Wall Street, kind of like the anti-war old left, not the identity politics left, but kind of like the anti-war, stop picking on third world countries left, right? And I guess you have people like Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders as kind of representative of those things. But
No,
again, it's the same
Bernie
thing.
Sanders sold out. Like Bernie
Of course, but
Sanders
that's
is
the whole
completely sold
point.
out.
That's the whole point, that these movements are always co-opted, right? And then they're just spun in a way to keep benefiting the system. And that's, in a sense, what Trump did to kind of this Tea Party movement that had sprung out, again, largely by people like Ron Paul. And then we're back at American Empire, right? So it's like we're going to end up at American Empire no matter what. Bernie's just there to jack you off and give the votes to Hillary at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. So with that, we'll end